Coming up on Newswatch in Focus, residents in Charleston are growing concerned as an uptick in armed robberies seems to occur. We'll talk to the Charleston Police Department in our studios next to find out if there really are more than usual and what residents can do to stay safe. Stay tuned, Newswatch in Focus starts now. Welcome and thanks for joining us for Newswatch in Focus. I'm your host, Kate Pleasant. Newswatch in Focus takes an in-depth look at the latest news stories from the greater Mattoon and Charleston area, as well as those surrounding it each week. This week, we're focusing on what seems like a rash of armed robberies around the Charleston area. We'll talk to the Charleston Police Department here in our studios in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at some of the stories that brought us this topic. What seemingly started residents noticing what felt like an increase in robberies started last December when a man was accused of robbing the Charleston Dollar General store at gunpoint. 28-year-old Bryant Furry of Charleston eventually pled guilty and received a plea deal. Furry pleaded guilty to burglary, forgery, and aggravated robbery. In exchange, several other charges against him were dropped. He was sentenced to 18 years in jail. Then in August, just a few days before students returned to Charleston, police responded to an armed robbery case on 10th Street, where the victim claimed he was robbed at gunpoint in the stairwell of his residence. Police say this was an isolated incident and not just a random act. More recently, a few more robberies have gained local attention and increased residents' concern about safety. Here's the latest from WEIU Newswatch.
For the second time this month, a robbery is reported near Eastern Illinois University. Police say the incident happened just before 7 Monday night. They say a man reported he was robbed by a suspect with a knife in the 1700 block of 12th Street. Charleston Police Chief Brian Baker says the victim was walking down the street when the suspect approached him at a slow run, pulled out a knife, and demanded items. Baker says the victim was cut across the left shoulder and chest.
It's always a good idea not to walk by yourself, especially after dark. That's just the best precaution someone can take. If someone, especially, I guess the typical would be if a female was found herself going to have to walk somewhere by herself, the recommendation would be to make a phone call and get some help, somebody come pick them up.
Police aren't releasing the victim's name at this time. They say the suspect is described as a young black male in his 20s, having a goatee and no mustache, and was wearing a black hoodie and black jeans with a logo. If you have any information on this case, contact the Charleston Police Department. Eastern Illinois University police are also trying to locate this subject. They believed he was involved in a robbery that happened September 7th at the University Court apartment complex. Police say a female victim was approached by the subject in the parking lot. No other details are being released, but officials are looking into whether both the robbery cases may be connected.
Welcome back to the studios. I'm joined now by Deputy Chief Dave Chambers from the Charleston Police Department. Thanks for joining me today.
Very happy to be here.
And we're talking about, of course, the recent armed robberies in Charleston. So from your perspective, can you kind of tell us where this lies as far as, you know, the numbers of them and the kind of the perspective?
Well, I think one of the things that you have to consider is I wouldn't consider that we've got a crime wave going on in Charleston. We have had 3 instances that have occurred in town, 1 reported instance on Eastern's campus, and we've had 2 instances that have occurred in town. It's a situation that we are investigating. Of course, the description we have is pretty generic and vague. Black male, approximately 6 feet tall, goatee, wearing a hoodie. That could be a lot of people. So what we have to do from our end is start putting pieces and parts together from people in the community that are phoning in tips, which we obviously always welcome, and starting to look for connections between stories and leads, and hope in any future crimes that would occur. Hopefully they don't, but start piecing these things together where we can establish a suspect line, as we've done before.
Okay, so you said, you know, this isn't a crime wave.
It's not a crime.
So obviously, you know, if people are concerned, should they be putting those concerns to rest?
Well, You know, the one thing that I would stress is I really get concerned when a sense of paranoia kind of starts to set in. Sometimes I think I'm starting to see that here a little bit, and I think everybody needs to take a breath a little bit. Is there cause to be cautious? There's always cause to be cautious. You should be cautious. When it comes to victimizations, we have some control over the amount of opportunity that we extend to a predator. And I think if you think of it in that realm, it gives you some control over your destiny. In this particular scenario, do we need to be paranoid and be afraid to walk down the street? No, I don't think that at all. Charleston is an extremely safe community. Has been for years. You know, I went to college here myself back in the early 80s. Extremely safe community, and it still is today. Are we having some instances right now that has, you know, piqued people's curiosity? Sure, but let's put it in perspective for what it is. You know, we have developed this view of ourselves here in Charleston. We're a small town, Midwest town, and nothing horrible ever happens there. Well, the sad truth is, yeah, bad things do happen here once in a while. They may not happen to the extent that they happen in, you know, maybe Decatur or East St. Louis or something like that. A
larger city.
Yeah, but they do happen here on occasion. We get shocked when we think, oh my God, this is something that happens in one of these other larger places. But the fact is, occasionally we do have things that occur here, but it's not nearly as frequent. Our crime rate here is very low, very safe. People don't need to be afraid to walk down the street, but I would say this. Doesn't hurt at night to be walking with somebody. You know, there's always safety in the herd. Walking in dark areas may not be a good idea, especially if you know that you have a situation to where there's, you know, some activity that's going on like we have right now, which I would say is isolated right now. And then I do firmly believe that we'll be making a case on this individual, whoever it is, in the near future.
Okay, so it's the kind of thing that this isn't necessarily a trend that's going to continue.
Oh, absolutely not. I don't believe this. Now, can I sit here and tell you, my God, we're not going to have any more armed robberies?
Right.
I can't say that because we don't even know who this guy is yet. But I can tell you this: is it somewhat of an anomaly? Sure. It's. I hate to call it a novelty, but for the sake of the conversation, and that's what's got people worked up, is because we don't have a whole lot of that here.
Right.
So it has. You know, it's raised cause for concern, and one of the things that I would say is take that energy and that cause for concern, and let's turn it to the positive and think, do we need to be paranoid? No, but we should always be cautious.
Okay, and so, you know, when you talk about, you know, you're going to put the pieces of the puzzle together and find the individual, it's not like an episode of a big cable television show, right? This doesn't happen in an hour.
No, it doesn't, and I wish it could. I really do wish it could. Like when we were talking about the description of the guy a little bit earlier, we don't have much to go on right now. We have very little. So you have to take those pieces, and it may take weeks, months, days, I don't know. I mean, it's just like putting a puzzle together, and until you get enough things to string together to get you into a lead, you know, it is difficult, but it's not impossible. And people, I think, sometimes we go to movies or we watch TV and things are resolved very quickly. Some tragedy occurs, the plot's laid out, and the story is, you know, the cavalry rides over the hill and saves the day and makes the case in 30 or 40 minutes. And, you know, if that could happen all the time, that would be super. But in the world of law enforcement, where you're piecing and stitching things together, that's really not very realistic.
Right, but the Charleston Police Department has a high success rate with this.
We have a very high success rate. We've got an extremely strong investigative unit. Our patrol guys take thorough reports, gather as much information as they can, and on these long-term ongoing investigations, like with this one, those things get turned over to investigations, and Lieutenant Reed and Detective Blagg, West, and Myers do a fantastic job. We have 2 certified crime scene technicians in our detective unit that work on cases. So, you know, here we have the public covered in terms of professional services and our ability to deal with it. I just think that, you know, people need to, you know, give the time for us to get things developed sometime. And I appreciate the frustration. We get frustrated, true, but it's just a matter of, you know, working diligently and stitching things together.
Okay, so if you just joined us, we're talking to Deputy Chief Dave Chambers from the Charleston Police Department about the recent armed robberies here in Charleston. And, you know, like you said before, it's the small town construct, really, and that's maybe why people are kind of showing concern, maybe. So are there any things outside of, you know, the obvious, like you said earlier, walking groups, avoiding dark areas, that people need to know to keep themselves, you know, maybe more aware?
Well, you know, you definitely don't want to set yourself up for failure. And you know, you certainly don't want to be setting up like some sort of meeting where you're trying to buy something off Craigslist or eBay or whatever else, and meeting someone you absolutely don't know in some strange place. I mean,
that's good to note now with a lot of people doing things like that.
Yeah, so. I mean, and you know, those particular marketplaces, and there's been victimizations across the country that have happened like that. You can plug that into any scenario. If you're meeting somebody that you don't know, there's always some element of potential risk there, I presume. But by and large, just in the living of life, you know, there's certain hours during the day, you know, a lot of crimes of victimization like this, or a lot of them will happen at night. Now, some of these didn't, but anytime that you're exposing yourself to where a crime can be concealed, I would say that you're opening the window of opportunity to a predator.
Okay.
So, and that's really the way that I would request that people think is, you know, keeping that window of opportunity closed as much as we can close it. It's never our fault when we're victimized.
Right.
But if that's the only way that you look at it, then it's kind of taking control of your destiny out of it. If you look at, I can reduce that window of opportunity for the predator and to protect myself, then it sort of puts destiny in your hands. I like looking at it that way a lot better. Okay.
And you know, we watch TV because, like you said, you know, a lot of people watch TV and think things kind of go that way, or we seem to develop that way. And it always seems to be somebody that person knows. You know, at the end it's revealed that is that the case in real life?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, some crimes maybe, other crimes no. When stuff like armed robberies like this, I would tend to say no, that's probably not the case. I mean, there's, and that's almost a discussion for another show,
right?
In terms of the dynamics behind some of these, but you know, there are like domestic battery crimes. Obviously, you're going to know that individual. Right. Sexual assault crimes, a lot of those, you know, are related to, you know, somebody that the victim knows. You get into these crimes like this that would seem to be monetary or possession driven, where somebody's trying to get something from you. I would say, you know, I would tend to say no, it's probably somebody you don't know. Okay, so a little more, I don't know, random, I guess you'd say, or opportunity? Certainly opportunity driven, which kind of comes back to our earlier discussion on limiting the opportunity, the risk of you getting victimized. Yeah. Okay, so you know, if we're talking about armed robberies, and we're talking about, you know, what the police have to go through to track down these people, because like you said earlier, you know, you're not dealing with a lot of description. There's a lot of puzzle pieces. So what is the typical process like after an armed robbery? Where do you go from start to end? What's the process like? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is the first people that are going to respond is going to be patrol units. They're going to listen to your story. They're going to take statements from any witnesses that may be around. They're going to want a description of what was taken. You know, if, let's say in your case, your purse was taken, they're going to ask for, was there any credit cards, you know, the credit card numbers, and they're going to try to extract as much of that information as they can that evening, try to get a description of the suspect as accurately as you can give. And they'll go out through the area and try to locate that individual. They, depending on the crime and what it is, they may do a neighborhood canvass. Okay. Drawing in information to try to see, was there somebody else that saw something? And essentially what we're trying to do when that happens is get a better, more a defined description of the suspect. Maybe somebody saw somebody from a different angle, so we can
add some details.
We can add some details to that sketch, so you end up with something more than, like in this case, you know, a black male, 6 feet tall, and a goatee. Well, there's a lot of people like that. Yeah, it's a lot. So, getting viewpoints from different angles. So, the patrolman will take whatever evidence from you, depending on the case. Detectives may be called out that night or may not, depends on what's going on. At any rate, at some point, unless the suspect is caught that night, but like in this case, where it's going to be a long-term protracted out deal, it's going to get turned over to investigations, because patrol has a constant deluge of things that they handle. So these long-term investigations, that's the reason we have an investigative unit, because they can devote time to these things. And then the victim definitely has somebody that they can contact. They can, from that point on, there'll be a detective assigned to their case, and they can deal with that detective. So detectives at that point are going to get reports from patrol, get themselves extremely familiar with the case. If something was stolen, you know, be checking various sources or areas where your stolen property may be sold or whatnot, and try to track it down that way. And then just start piecing things together, and then look at other reports and other cases that have been taken in, and seeing if there's links between other reports that have been made, or other, or not arrests, but victimizations that have occurred. And out of all of that, start seeing if we can hone a picture in of things that connect. They may go re-interview the witnesses.
And what does that net? Does that sometimes net new details?
Oh, absolutely.
Or is it?
Absolutely. I mean, and you know, that night the night patrol is there. You, the victim, are upset. So by the time you get home and have a chance to calm down a little bit, think a little bit more clearly, your recollection of the events may be a little more clear the next day. So they'll probably talk to you again. Same thing with victims. They may remember something a little different, or maybe through talking to other people, they heard that, well, I heard that what's their names saw a piece of this too, or they heard something. So you'll end up tracking down a lot of connections and leads like that.
You know, and if you're the victim in a situation like this, I'm sure it's traumatic. Is there any advice for things you should be paying attention to if you can, you know, that will help the police later?
Well, the best thing that you can do, and I would strongly advise this, is try to pay attention to every detail of the victim that you possibly can. What does their face look like? What do their eyes look like? What kind of hair do they have? What kind of clothing were they wearing? Do they have any special things on them, like tattoos that may be unique to them, or maybe scars that may be unique to them, or you know, maybe they're missing a digit or something. Things like that that would be extremely unique to that individual. Did they walk or run with a limp? So all of those things will help us when we're trying to narrow it down later on.
So would you say, you know, because again, for people that might just be joining us, we're talking about the armed robberies here in Charleston. And as we're saying, it's not a crime wave. That's what you've told us once before. So is there things you think people need to know about these as well? This small group of armed robberies that have happened that, you know, maybe...
I don't know if they're connected or not. We don't have enough information right now that would necessarily substantiate that it is one person. We don't have enough information to say that it isn't either. The only thing that we can say with certainty is that we've had 2 instances in our jurisdiction that have been armed robberies. As far as just the regular citizen goes, I really don't know that it's significant whether they're linked or not, because if the message is going to be cautious, be safe, operate in a safe manner, then it really doesn't matter whether they're linked or not. Now, on the heels of that, I'll also say this. I don't think there's some big conspiracy of armed robbers that have rolled into town. I've never even heard of such a thing. So, you know, it is what it is at this point.
And do you think crimes like this tend to pick up once there's one? Do you see some more right away? Is that a normal kind of trend, or? Is it unique?
I think one of the things that you have to think about is armed robberies up close and personal. We have a lot of burglaries here in town.
Right. Kind of break-ins.
That's not up close and personal. Burglars never intend for you to even be home.
Right.
They don't want to be around anybody. They don't want a confrontation. That's the last thing they want. Robbery is a little different because I'm right here with you and I'm not taking it from your house, I'm taking it from you. So yeah, it is a different cat. So, you know, with that being said, I think that just more substantiates the fact of, you know, we don't have a group or a horde of armed robbers. That don't even make sense, but that's not the case. You are talking about a different type of encounter, I guess.
Okay, yeah. You know, you mentioned burglaries, and you said we have some of those around town, as you would in any town.
Sure.
I'm sure. Are there things that residents can do to prevent burglaries? I mean,
absolutely.
Is there advice for that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I strongly urge you to, especially if you're gone for like a weekend, make your house look like somebody's there. Put some lights on a timer, maybe leave a radio on, or make arrangements for a neighbor to come pick up your newspapers and your mail so it's not just piling up. You know,
Obvious signs that there's no one there.
Yeah, all of those things just scream no one's home. So if you make your place look like somebody's home, you're going to reduce your risk of something happening. You know, you can't, and I can't stress enough, burglaries, those bad guys never intend to see you. So if they think somebody's there, the odds of you getting hit are very
pretty
minor.
out there.
So, you know, if you look here in the Eastern, during Christmas break, campus town down in here, we get hit hard. Well, it's because everybody knows the kids are gone. So, you know, for any Eastern students that are watching, when you leave over Thanksgiving or something, you take your expensive stuff with you.
Computers
and your computer, yeah, load it up and take it home with you.
Okay. What about neighborhood watch? You know, you hear that, you know, you've heard that, and it used to be a bigger thing, it seems like, than it is now, but is that something that you think people should still do or still do here in town?
I am a firm believer in communities taking care of themselves. You don't have to have a formal neighborhood watch organization to have neighborhood watch. Essentially what you're talking about is neighbors being neighbors.
Paying attention.
Pay attention. People that live in an area, they know when something is wrong with their neighbor's house. They know how their neighbor lives, they know how their neighbor keeps things. If something is off center, then you need to move on that. You know, I don't think neighborhood watch requires some sort of, you know, vigilante activity or anything like that, but I do think that it requires just taking the next step and paying attention to what's going on at your neighbor's house. And that's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
You know, it's not possible for law enforcement to keep things from happening.
They can't be everywhere.
We can't be everywhere. First of all, you wouldn't want a law enforcement group that big, and secondly, who could pay for it?
Right.
Law enforcement is there to make cases, enter things into court for into the system so they can be prosecuted, make arrests, and to do the, you know, I guess the strong arm stuff, for lack of a better term, you know, to get people arrested and whatnot. But that does not alleviate the responsibility of community members to pay attention to their surroundings and to their property and their neighbor's property and things. So community watch, the concept of it, I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of people taking care of each other in them within their community. Right. That's the whole thing about, if that wasn't going to be the case, you might as well live out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Right?
So it's the kind of thing, you know, of course, if someone was concerned in their neighborhood, they could call the police to have the police do.
Absolutely, and that's what we're there for. But I think that, you know, we get complacent thinking that because there is a police department here, I don't have to do anything. Well, that's not the case, because like what we talked about with the robbery suspects, Who do we, the police, go back to make a case? We go back to the people. We go back to the citizenry. What did you see? What did you see? What did you see?
To the neighbors, like you just
We go back to the neighbors. So if you're going to fold all these things together, is neighborhood watch important? Absolutely it is.
Okay.
By all means.
All right. Well, do you think there's anything else we need to know before we run out of time today?
I think that I want people to understand Charleston is an extremely safe town.
Okay.
We're a safe community. Our crime rates here are low. Our UCR rates are low. Unfortunately, we're having a couple of incidents right now that are alarming, but there is no cause for people to be terrified to walk the streets.
No
that
panic,
is not,
right.
no, there's no sense for panic, no.
Okay. Well, Deputy Chief Dave Chambers from the Charleston Police Department, we thank you for coming to Newswatch in Focus today. We're out of time right now, but we thank you for watching. I'm your host, Kate Pleasant. We hope you'll stay tuned next for the Four Rivers Ag Report with Fred Peralta, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Newswatch in Focus. Is there a news story happening in your community? Let us know about it. You can email our newsroom at news@weiu.net. Call us at 581-2911 or write to us at 600 Lincoln Avenue, Charleston, Illinois 61920. Your story could be featured on Newswatch or right here on this show, Newswatch in Focus. For more news all the time, visit our website at weiu.net. Thanks for watching.